In the year 1914, the biggest war of 19th century began. The most powerful states who were fighting in it were Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire against Great Britain, the United States, France, Russia, Italy, and Japan. This war was initiated by a single misunderstanding among government officials, which eventually led to the ending of the war in 1918, in which 40 million people were killed. Yes, I'm talking about World War I, with about 9 to 11 million people were military personnel. The civilian death toll was about 6 to 13 million, and at least 2 million died from diseases and 6 went missing, presumed dead, and the rest is still history. After that, in 1939, the second biggest but deadliest war occurred, having 85 million people killed. I'm talking about World War II. This war alone had 50 to 55 million civilians die, and military deaths were around 21 to 25 million, and the other deaths including were captivities or prisoners of war, which ranged in the numbers of 5 million. And no one talks about that. This was the bloodiest war. It was amongst two main powers, the Axis powers and the Allied powers. Germany, Italy, and Japan were the Axis powers. France, Great Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union, along with China, were in Allied powers. This war alone led to the great bombings we know today as of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Let's talk in detail about what is the reason that governments fight but the people have to suffer, and why governments often lead to the most childish decisions made possible. Stay till the end. Speaking of today, we all have survived several external and internal wars, from which the current issue that is devastating is of Palestine and Israel. I must tell you this, that Palestine and Israel war has a whole history of fighting and having a bitter relationship with each other. But the scale till today of continuous rampages has crossed the limit of patience, and here Israel is taking full advantageous control over the poor civilians who were supposed to be out of war. Have a look above on the screen of how war rules work for civilians. Is Israel following the war rules above? No, absolutely not.
ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה, לא במבצע, לא בסבבים, במלחמה.
According to the report presented by Al Jazeera, till now, Palestine has killed 1,139 people and have injured 8,730 of Israel's people. But in comparison, Israel's so-called war has ended the lives of 40,265 people, in which mostly are children and women. Along with it has injured 93,144 people in total. Can you imagine that? When you have leaders speaking in this manner,
on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
Du meine Arbeit für richtig hältst, ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißige dass ich anständig meine Zeit verwendet habe im Dienste meines Volkes. Gib du jetzt deine Stimme ab. Wenn ja, dann tritt für mich ein, so wie ich für dich eingetreten bin.
Who doesn't want to vote them and select them as leaders because these speakers promise of no trouble. People don't want trouble with themselves or with any other. They don't want to be victim of every bad decision an individual's government takes.
They refuse to make the simple distinction between those who target terrorists and those who target civilians, between the democratic state of Israel and the terrorist thugs of Hamas. We recently learned from the National Security Director, U.S. Director of National Intelligence, that Iran is funding and promoting anti-Israel protests in America.
No one in Gaza is okay. My family are all in Gaza and none of them are okay.
It's an oppression that's been going on for decades, so that's why people are angry. But it doesn't mean that people condone Hamas in the slightest, because being pro-Palestine doesn't mean that you're anti-Semitic, and I think that's really important to stress.
The government will supposedly offer the most impossible possibilities like enhancing the economy in short time, high wages for one and all, and promising dreams in returns for leadership support, and the list goes on. The government officials will tell you sweet tales of your country and its people even though the corruption never goes away. The government officials will induce souvenirs for patriotic services. Likewise, Emperor Hirohito did to his people by dragging them in the pit of patriotism by brainwashing them to sacrifice themselves. Can you imagine a small child being given bombs to explode wherever the need arises and ultimately sacrificing themselves? Goodness! Let's explore each point carefully of how, in most states, these tricks could be avoided. Number 1. Never choose or listen to a leader who doesn't keep his promises. Number 2. Never be patriotic enough to give your life in useless situations. In World War II, the Emperor of Japan emphasized this fact so much that he held anyone accountable if he or she did not did as the Emperor said. Even so much so that the Emperor of Japan got roughly 70,000 to 135k people killed in Hiroshima and 60,000 to 80,000 people in Nagasaki, and was still not ready to surrender. Number 3. Always remember that people have the power to make anything happen. So always decide carefully whether you are selecting a narcissist who engages more in yapping than doing stuff, or a real doer who doesn't speak much. In the end, the decision is yours. Join me on the journey to make an impact by subscribing and supporting my content. Until next time, Hurriya Palestine.